right before the pandemic, I had went to the doctor, and the doctor had basically told me that if I continue on my trajectory in terms of like not eating correctly and choosing the wrong times of the day to eat and essentially not exercising, that within 6 months I would probably have a massive heart attack.
Want more Rolling with Tay podcasts? Well, follow on Instagram and Twitter at Rolling with Tay. Visit the blog rollingwithtay.wordpress.com for more content, and be sure to sign up for the monthly newsletter. And lastly, subscribe to the YouTube channel Rolling with Tay. This is the Rolling with Tay podcast. I'm your host, Tasia, aka Tay, and this is episode 9, and my guest is Victor. Victor and I share a friend in common. That friend name is Shadrach. Shadrach was a guest on season 1, so be sure to check out his episode, Walk Before You Run. But when Shadrach and I started biking together, he would mention you, and he was like, yo, my friend is really dope. Maybe you should have him on your podcast. He started biking. He biked from New Jersey to Philly. And I was like, okay, Shaddy, I got to talk to this guy. So Shadrach connected the two of us, and here we are. Welcome to the podcast, Victor.
Thank you so much, Tasha. It's a pleasure to be here. Just glad to be here to share my experience, and looking forward to having an all-out conversation.
All right, me as well. How are you feeling today?
I'm actually feeling good. Actually, not as good because this is my off day for riding. I had to actually change my regimen a little bit because when I first started riding, I was pretty much every day, but seems like age is catching up to me. So I'm starting a new regimen of like resting every other day, and I'm still getting used to that. But I'm okay.
That's good. I take some time off the bike as well. Sometimes I'm like, no, I want to ride today, but my body's like, you need some rest.
Yeah.
you don't need to burn out.
No, not at all. Not at this point.
Right. How many miles do you typically ride?
As of now, I'm riding. Well, let me just tell you what I did yesterday. Yesterday, I rode about 27 miles, and that was primarily commute to and from work.
Okay.
So door to door from my house to my job is about 8 miles.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm doing that twice a day. That's 16 miles. And then I also ride on my lunch break, and I usually try to do about maybe another 8 to 10 miles, give or take. So yeah. So on those weeks that I'm in the office, it's possible for me to clock in about 100 to 115 miles in a week.
That is nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Forget walking around the block during your lunch break. You're like, I'm
No.
gonna do 8 miles.
Yeah, just a quick 8. Yep. So, but that's really down from a much higher, rate of biking that I used to do. And to get into that a little bit, I essentially started biking right after I contracted COVID. And this was back when the pandemic first took hold back in March of 2020. I had that strain of COVID that everybody was like in the hospital for months, and unfortunately, folks were succumbing to the virus. And prior to the pandemic taking hold, I always had like these varying states of health where, there'll be some years that I'll be like strict on a diet, on a mission to get right with my health. But I think everybody in the audience and pretty much anybody with an earshot can relate to, these start stops that you do with, dieting and health wellness and stuff like that, where, you'll commit to a gym membership or commit to some other kind of like change for the better. And it's always short lived. And I always had like the worst discipline in the world. And right before the pandemic, I had went to the doctor, and the doctor had basically told me that if I continue on my trajectory in terms of like not eating correctly and choosing the wrong times of the day to eat and essentially not exercising, that within 6 months I would probably have a massive heart attack.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So, you know, naturally that's a semi wake up call for anybody. And I was thinking in my mind, all right, you know what? I'm gonna start, or at least try to make some changes that in my subconscious I kind of knew that whatever changes I make will be another short lived effort that maybe might last 3 to 6 months, and then I'll probably go back to doing what I was doing. And then the pandemic hit, and shortly, I think within days of the lockdown, I came down with COVID, and
Mm.
I was out for a whole month for my job. And just to put in perspective, for as long as I've been working, I've never called out 2 consecutive days sick.
Mm.
And to be out for a month, and of which that time, there wasn't one point that I did not think I had to call 911.
Mm.
Um, so being out for a month out of work and being in like varying states of abilities because of how debilitating COVID was at the time for me. Um, the only time that I found enough energy to do anything, was when my fever was under control.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to credit my wife for this part, that it was her that said, "Hey, you know what? Instead of kind of laying around and just waiting for this, virus to kind of kick back in, because it was always like 1 minute I was fine, or rather 1 hour I was fine, and the other hour I was like out for the count. Anytime that the virus appeared to be under control, she would tell me, "Listen, why don't we get on that bike that you haven't used in a long time? Just ride around the block, just to kind of you know, keep yourself somewhat active, at least until the fever like comes back."
Mm-hmm.
So, of course I was lazy. I was like, "No, I don't want to do it." But then she forced me. She was like, "You know what? You need to get out, get some fresh air." And there was nothing else to do because everything was on lockdown. So that's what I did. And once I got over COVID, I kind of put things in perspective. I said, you know what? I don't know what would have happened if I didn't, but I feel like riding the bike just around the block probably saved my life.
Mm-hmm.
And once I fully recovered a month later, well, I wouldn't say I fully recovered, but recovered enough where, I can kind of get some semblance of things back. Um, that's when I decided maybe I should start riding bike a little more. And maybe that's the one thing that will force me to, stick to getting right with my health once and for all. So I started riding maybe like, 4 miles a day. It actually started with one time I took my son and we rode to the bridge and back, meaning the George Washington Bridge. And that's
Mm-hmm.
about 2.5 miles away from my house. And it was just so enjoyable just to do that, just to kind of feel free. And that 4 miles later became 8 miles. 8 miles became 10 miles.
Mm-hmm.
Then it became every other day. Then again, during the course of the pandemic, where everything was still locked down, next thing you know, I was riding 3 times a day, and each ride would be a minimum of 15 miles. I would ride all hours, all reasonable hours of the day. I would ride at night, ride early in the morning, at noon. Um, it at its peak. I think there was one month in particular during the course of the pandemic, and I'm going from, let's say, from April 2020 through now. There was at least a few months where I rode as much as close to 700 miles.
Woo.
Yeah, yeah, and some of those times were not the most ideal. I remember there was one time where I rode from my house to the New York state line along the Palisades Parkway
Mm-hmm.
on probably the hottest day of the year. which made no sense. But but, but you know, I survived it. But though now with the pandemic kind of, you know, easing a little bit, obviously things opening up, time is a little more at a premium than it was a couple of years ago. So
Mm-hmm.
though I'm not biking as much, um, the fact that biking essentially saved my life is what keeps me on my bike.
Mm.
And I think it's what also motivated that those couple of months where I was doing 700 miles in a month was firmly rooted in the fact that I just was and still is in fear of the state of health that I was in before the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, that conversation with the doctor where they're telling me that if I don't change my habits, that I could be a strong candidate for a massive heart attack. That coupled with my first experience with COVID pretty much kind of scared me straight. And, you know, getting on that bike, following my wife's orders to get on that bike whenever my fever was under control, I'm always going to think back to that and say, you know, yeah, this is what not only saved my life in a physical sense, but also emotionally and mentally, and even with my family. Because before the pandemic, when my health was in that questionable state, you know, there were a lot of things that I would dread doing with my kids because I just didn't have the energy to keep it up. Like I couldn't
Mm.
even throw a softball or baseball straight
Mm.
with them before, you know, without getting too fatigued. And you know, riding bike just gave me, you know, this endurance that I didn't think I could get back. And this was like an endurance that I didn't have since like high school.
Yeah.
Um, you know, and again, it's like even though I don't have as much time to ride 700 miles a month like I used to, um, you know, at this point now, the only thing that's going to keep me off my bike for any period of time is, you know, any of my kids' activities. But it's like any bit of free time that I have that I don't have to account with family or anything like that, I'm on my bike. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? And it's like I'm on my bike to kind of remind myself that, you know what, I'm trying to live as long as possible, not only for myself but for the folks that depend on me.
Wow. Listen, if the doctor would have told me that, and I would have gotten COVID, I would have been scared straight as well.
Yeah.
So I completely understand you. And then once you started getting on the bike and pushing yourself to go further and realizing like, yo, I really enjoy this, not
Yeah.
only for the health benefits, but like I'm enjoying it, that
Mhm.
kept you going.
Yes, it did. It did.
So I'm right there with you. I'm like
Mhm.
I'm just finding the joy in riding a bike
Yeah.
keeps me, and like you said, what it
Yep.
does for you mentally and physically. So
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, it's just so many, you know, so many aspects that I could touch up on. I mean, there's probably not enough time for us to even get down to that, but you know, just even yeah, even from like a mental aspect. I mean, you know, the way I approach different situations is far different than it was before. You know what I mean? Like
mm-hmm.
I look back to how I conducted myself in various scenarios, and you know, relatively speaking, it's like wow, like I look back and say, damn, I was pretty boxed in terms of
Mm-hmm.
like my creativity levels and enterprising thinking and stuff like that. Like now, it's like forget about it. You know, it's limitless in terms of what anybody's potential is. You know what I mean? And it's it's like one of those things. Like it's like you have all this information on how to get right with yourself, but of course, unfortunately, it takes like almost like a life changing event for you to think, even consider the changes. You know what I'm saying? And
Mm-hmm.
and the other thing is that even with biking, it kind of made me think, all those years that I made excuses saying that I don't have time to do this and I don't have time to do
Mm-hmm.
that. And it's just like biking really taught me that there are really 24 hours in a day.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? You don't, and yet you don't need the 24 hours to, to complete everything, or at least to complete enough to, to make yourself whole. So, again, I'm not saying that biking is a cure all and be all, but it definitely did enough for me to feel like that I can, pretty much take on anything that comes my way. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When you're going up those hills, when you're climbing up those
Yeah.
hills.
Oh yeah, yeah. Especially that Fordham Road Hill. That's no joke. You know, especially since there's no bike lane there. Hint, hint.
Listen, you're better than me. I'm like, I'm gonna avoid this. I'm gonna go down Third Avenue. Like, I don't want to do this.
Actually, I did that yesterday, but I don't even know if I helped or hurt my cause. I actually went down Park Avenue to go home instead of going up Fordham, and it was really more because of the safety aspect,
Yeah.
since there's no bike lane, right? So I'm coming down Park Avenue. I make my right at East Tremont, and I get to Webster, and I'm like, oh man, this is Mount Everest. I just got to Mount Everest. I'm like, oh my goodness, what am I thinking? But but like this whole experience, I said, you know what? I came this far. I can't stop now. I just gotta, you know what? I'll just shift it down gear and just
Mm-hmm.
keep pedaling. You know what I'm saying? And when I get back up top, I'll flip it back to the eighth gear.
Yep. Yep.
You know what I'm saying? But yeah, I mean, I just can't stress it enough. It saved my life. You know what I'm saying? And you know, again, biking, I know it's not for everybody, but it did so much for me. It did stuff for me that not even a gym membership could do.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like the I pretty much lost maybe like the equivalent of a child during the course of that, and so I'm talking about in terms of my weight loss.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was, just put in perspective. I was 5'8". I'm 5'8", and at the time that the doctors gave me that, that warning, I was about 220.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Within a year of biking, I was down to 155.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So, again, that definitely opened me up to being able to participate in other activities that I wouldn't have otherwise considered.
Yeah.
Which brings me to the Century ride that I did uh, back in the summer of 2021, and that actually came about because another friend of mine that I've known since high school, he was actually relocating to Michigan, and he obviously saw that I was starting to ride, and years ago I used to not so much make fun of him, but I used to be like, man, what the hell are you thinking? Because he's done like rides from like DC to Pittsburgh
Mm-hmm.
and all this other stuff, and I just said to him like, what? How is that even possible? You know what I'm saying? But now I get it.
Yeah.
After a couple of years of riding, I understood it and I got it. And then he actually appreciated the fact that now I'm riding and stuff like that. So he had said, "Listen, I'm moving away. Um, I see that you've been riding, and you commute to work, you do all these rides to like Coney Island, and you've done upstate and this and that. So you're ready for a Century ride. Let's just do it. Let's just do it. Let this be our like last hurrah." To hang out and stuff like that. So I just kind of took it like, you know what, this is an excuse to hang out with my friend, and also out of recognition that he saw that I was riding. He saw that I ride to work on a regular basis. I've done these weekend rides to like Coney Island, upstate New York, and he saw that I can, I routinely do like on the weekends. I always made sure to do at least like 2 50-mile rides. So I would just knock out 100 miles in the weekend alone.
Mm-hmm.
So when he saw that I was doing that consistently, he was like, dude, you're ready for a Century ride. Let's kind of kill two birds with one stone. We'll do the Century ride, and that'll also be our last hurrah, hanging out together and stuff like that. That'll be a nice send off for him or whatever. And I was like, all right, cool, no problem. So, we linked up. I left my house at 4:30 in the morning. I met him at Journal Square in Jersey City about 5 o'clock. And then, we began pedaling down Jersey and into Philly. We got across the bridge into Philadelphia by maybe a little before 1 in the afternoon. And of course, this was on another one of those hottest days of the year that made no sense. That by the time I crossed into Philly, I had like sodium deposits all over my arms and legs. I mean, it was crazy. And the crazier thing, I was looking at him and saying, "Hey, you want to ride back?" And he just looked at me like I was like from another planet, and he was just like, "Nah, man. I bought us Amtrak tickets to come back. All right." We, he's like, you know what? One thing at a time. So we did that. But again, that Century ride was, out of a friendship that I still have with my friend. Obviously, even though he's moved on and gone to Michigan. But yeah, that Century ride came because really he was also the only person that was willing to do something like that. So yeah, I haven't had another opportunity to do a Century ride again, but I'm still considering it. I just need to find a couple of folks that are willing to do it.
Yeah, listen, the biking community, there are a number of clubs and events that will put on their own Century rides.
Right.
So one in particular, Century Plus, they do rides over Century. So
oh, okay.
Yeah, and another one is MBR. So there's a few of them out there that actually do a ride from New York to Philly, or they'll do a Century ride. So I'll share their information with you so you can check them out.
Sure. I love that.
Yeah. So that's really cool that you did that with your friend, and that you took this journey. Like, all right, we're going to Philly. Now, think about it. Before you started cycling, how you looked at your friend. Did anybody in your family look at you like, what are you doing? Like, you gonna bike where?
Like, let me tell you, to this day, they still think I am crazy. To this day, they see me walk in like with all this gear and sweating up a storm, and they just look at me as like, dude, what are you trying to prove? And I look at them, I'm like, I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm just trying to stay alive. That's all I'm trying to do. You know what I'm saying? And after we laugh about it, they get it. I mean, in the beginning, they were even more like giving me that side eye, like, really? They look at me like, yo, it's 5:30 in the morning. You're like really gonna go out there? Yeah. I mean, and also I forgot to mention, I do ride year round. No kind of weather stops me, except for frozen rain. You know what I mean? Like, even if it's snowing, I'm fine with it. The only time when I draw the line is when like the floor is literally like coated with ice, because that I won't mess with. But I've ridden in temperatures as low as 8 degrees.
Ooh.
Yeah, I have, and not a quick ride either. I've done like a 20-mile ride in 8-degree weather with like 15-mile-per-hour sustained winds. So you could do the math about what that wind chill feels like. Yeah.
I don't even want to go under 45 degrees. You talking about 8?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying I did it on the regular. Like, I mean, compared to like a year or two ago, I definitely pared back those rides. Like, I'm definitely more getting closer to your threshold, where if I see that it's like 35 and with a certain wind speed that's out there, I'm definitely being a little more generous about that. But yeah, there were definitely, I would say, the winter of 2021 and 22 for sure. I was doing plenty of rides in like sub-freezing temperatures and high wind gusts and stuff like that. Yeah, and I wouldn't even give it a second thought. I remember there was one time that I think I had sent my wife a picture and said, "Hey, listen, I'm ready to come home," and it was a picture of me on the 3rd Avenue Bridge with icicles coming down my helmet. Yeah. So yeah, I was no joke. I don't dare myself to do that now as much.
Yeah.
Like, even though we didn't really have much of a winter this year, but
Mhm.
but there were actually a couple of days that I passed on riding my bike that 2 years ago I would have been like, yo, that's like riding in 60-degree weather. Like, I passed up on like some 45-degree days that 2 years ago I would have been like, please, I'm riding 60 miles in that weather.
Yeah.
But
Mhm.
yeah, that definitely got some suspect looks from my family.
I can imagine that. They're like, wait,
Yeah,
it's in the teens and you going outside.
exactly.
We're not even leaving the house and you're going for a bike ride. um,
Yeah.
what has been like the most challenging on your cycling journey from when once you started?
Um, I think the challenge. Well, one challenge was riding with a bike that I had for like 15 years, and realizing that um, I needed to not only kind of update the bike, but I also realized that now, I guess compared to when I was younger, that you needed to do so much prep
Mm-hmm.
before a ride. I know, like when I first started riding, it was just a matter of me just getting on the bike and maybe throwing on a helmet, and that was it. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't really pack any provisions. I didn't have so much as a bag with a towel inside of it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, um I just didn't realize that, yeah, there's a lot of work that goes into like preparing for a ride, and even post ride,
Mm-hmm.
having to kind of re-educate myself on not only what it means to become a cyclist again, but also all the right tools and the right gear, and just to make sure that you're prepared while you're out there. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? I mean, a lot of people I know, they talk about getting their endurance up to get on a bridge, or to go uphill and stuff like that. Nah, for me it was just like understanding that I shouldn't just go out like without any like tools and
Mm-hmm.
water and stuff like that, because the last time I rode with that kind of frequency, I was kind of in high school, even like back in the days when we had our BMX bikes and stuff like that. We didn't think about things like that. We just got on the bike and just rode, and wherever we ended up, we ended up.
Yeah.
But now it's like it's just so much different, where like now we're actually thinking about the flat tires. We're thinking about you know if our bodies is going to be like punishing us after the ride and stuff like that. Thinking
Mm-hmm.
about getting a different type of seat, so this way you don't get sores after the ride. I mean, all that, I was just like, man, what I mean? Like, it almost got to a point where I was just like, man, I'm thankful for all these stimulus checks that are coming in during the pandemic, because I don't know if I would have been able to afford to keep this up if it didn't happen when it did. You know what I mean? I mean,
Yeah.
now it's like, now that I'm wiser about riding, like, I found what works for me and what doesn't. So, I'm able to have like the right type of gear and stuff like that. And I know that I don't have to like spend money at like a REI or something like that, because those prices are like out of control. If that was the only place that I could go to, I don't know if I would be able to like ride this long. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, like I said, a lot of folks, I know a lot of folks talk about getting their endurance up, but for me, it was just like getting the right gear and getting knowing how and when to ride in
Yeah.
certain conditions, even like in those like sub freezing conditions that we just talked about.
Yeah, definitely getting the right gear.
Yeah.
And you're right. Like when I first started cycling, I was like, all right, cool. Let me just get on this bike. And then like my eyes were so wide. Like I would step in an REI or a bike shop and see all this gear. Like, oh, I need this, I need that. I don't need half of that stuff, you know? So it was, I understand you because this is a very expensive hobby.
But yeah, I mean, there was, just the idea of having to make sure that you had, the right gear, because, as you stated, it is an expensive hobby. Um, but I think that was for me, that was like the biggest challenge, making sure that I had what I needed. Like if I had to kind of, get a different type of seat to make the ride more comfortable, maybe get a different bike for, a different type of biking condition and stuff like that. Like I started out with a mountain bike,
Mm.
and but now I've since evolved and gotten also a hybrid bike, but I still wanted to have that suspension option. So I have a hybrid bike with that has front suspension. So now it's like I take out the mountain bike when the weather is questionable, like because like I said, I ride in all conditions. So the mountain bike comes out whenever it's during the winter time or when the weather's rainy. And on a day like this, I'll take the hybrid out.
Nice. Nice. What did you ride to Philly?
I rode on the mountain bike, believe it or not.
Whoa.
Yeah, yeah, that was interesting because my friend he actually rode on a folding bike, if you can believe that.
Oh, nice. I
Yeah,
have a folding bike as well. So, all right, nice.
yeah, yeah. I haven't gotten to that point yet, but it definitely like piqued my interest when I saw him on it because my worry was that I always felt like the tires weren't wide enough for me to be confident on it. You know what I'm saying? But he was able to do a century ride on a folding bike, so that definitely you know kind of upped my confidence a little bit and maybe looking into that. But again, like we said, this is an expensive habit, so if I'm not careful,
Yeah.
I might end up losing my house or something.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
know a few people that have bikes, like
yeah,
4 and 5 bikes. It's like, woo.
yeah. I mean, that's a dream for me. I'm just grateful that I even have two bikes.
Yeah. No, I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
What advice would you give someone who wants to who's interested in taking the steps to getting back into biking? Like they have been off the bike for so long. What
Yeah.
advice would you give to them?
Well, the first thing is to just make sure that you give yourself the time that you need. Because again, like I said before, biking taught me that there is 24 hours in a day.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to convince yourself that you can make that time. Um, Also, easier said than done. What I won't recommend is do not wait for a health scare to
Mm-hmm.
do it. Um, Too many times we wait for health scares to make certain changes. Um, Biking is too much fun to wait for a health scare.
Right.
You know what I mean? As someone that's been through it, I could definitely understand about the ideas of going to a gym and stuff like that because just the idea of having to like hop on the train or the bus or getting in the car to get to the gym, like that alone for me is enough to say, ugh, what am I doing here? You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, unless you're fortunate to like live steps away from a gym. Um, but with biking, it's like it's just such an escape. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Mm-hmm.
And not only mentally and physically, but it also kind of puts you in a time machine, especially if you were somebody that grew up riding bike like I did.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's another thing. You know what I mean? Like it delivers a sense of freedom that you're just not going to get in any other kind of exercise. I mean, the only thing that may come close to that is maybe jogging or walking. Um, but any opportunity to just be out there, whether it's out in the city or in the in one of those trails upstate, you know what I mean? Like just the fact that you're on a bike, um, it's almost like time. Time is all yours. Like that's yours. Nobody could take that from you.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Any goals? Any cycling goals?
Yeah, I one of them is definitely to at least get one century in per year. I'd like to
Mm-hmm.
do ideally I would like to do three per year.
Okay.
Um, and just to maintain what I started and really not let anything or anybody talk me out of biking. You know what I'm saying? Because again, I can't stress it enough. It saved my life. It gave me back the life that I thought I couldn't get.
Mm.
So my goal is to make sure that I continue biking the way I have been, and also anybody in my family, like I always encourage them, hey, listen, you want to ride with me? You know what I'm saying? Like get them to enjoy biking the way I do. And so far, it's looking like it's working because
Oh, great.
my daughter rode with me to the bridge a couple of weeks ago for the first time, and this was after like almost a year of trying to convince her to do it. So she did it, and now the bug got her. She's already asking me about some trail up in New
Nice.
Jersey that's like 12 miles, and she actually found it. I'm like, really? Look at you, check you out. So
Nice.
yeah, so I mean, yeah, that's pretty much what I set out to do. I mean, never to get off this bike, because again, for me to get off this bike is for me to put my life in jeopardy, and I'm
Mm.
not willing to do that. I'm not willing to compromise that.
I hear you, Victor. I hear you. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I'm
Thank you.
glad that we got a chance to chop it up. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
we'll have to ride together. Um,
yeah, definitely, definitely. I'm with
listen,
that.
listen.
I
I
see you on Strava all the time, so one day it's gonna happen sooner than you think.
listen. I'm gonna pick the day because it seems like you either pick really hot days or it's so
Yeah, I'm not
I'm
good with that.
I'm gonna pick the day. But yeah, I definitely want to ride with you and talk more about cycling with you.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And also we definitely need to get my man Shaddy on there because
Oh
you know
yes.
he talks about jogging and everything. See, that's one thing. That's one thing. I can't jog for the life of me. Not to say that I don't have the ability. I don't have the discipline or the motivation.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And I always take my hat off to him for his jogging endeavors and stuff like that. And I always tell him, listen, you wanna hang with me? Listen, we gotta be on the bike, man.
All right. All right. So yep. So me, you, and Shaddy, we're gonna get some
Yeah,
bikes.
that's it. That's it. Anywhere in the BX, I'll just find me.
All right. This is the Rolling with Tay podcast. I'm your host, Tasia, aka Tay, and thanks for listening.